Don't forget to subscribe. Enjoy your viewing.
I never imagined that the person I trusted the most in the world could betray me so deeply. My name is Michael Andrews, and until recently, I believed that my life was built on a foundation of unwavering love and mutual respect with my wife, Elena. We had been together for over 10 years, sharing dreams, laughter, and even the quiet moments of everyday life that often speak louder than any grand gesture. But one fateful evening, I discovered that our perfect facade was nothing more than an illusion. It started with subtle hints, a forgotten phone call here, a strange message there. I dismissed them as mere coincidences at first, convincing myself that everyone has their off days. Yet, as the days passed, the whispers of doubt grew louder in the silence of our home. I began to notice how Elena would become unusually secretive with her phone, retreating into a world from which I was slowly being excluded. The warmth of her smile, once reserved solely for me, seemed to fade into a distant memory. Late one autumn night, when the wind howled against the window panes and the rain tapped out a mournful rhythm, I stumbled upon a conversation on her laptop. The screen displayed messages between Elena and another man, passionate, secretive, and unmistakably intimate. My heart pounded like a relentless drum, and a cold shock seized my entire being. I felt as if the ground beneath me had crumbled away, leaving me to dangle in a void of betrayal and disbelief. In that moment, every memory we had forged together was tainted by the realization that I had been living a lie. I recalled the countless times Elena and I had talked about our future, our shared hopes and dreams. We had planned a family, a house full of love, and a lifetime of adventures side by side. How could all of that be built on deceit? I felt a swirling tempest of emotions, rage, despair, and an overwhelming sense of loneliness that threatened to consume me. As I sat in the dim glow of our living room, I questioned everything. The gentle hum of our refrigerator, the creaks of the old wooden floorboards, and even the ticking of the clock seemed to mock me with reminders of moments that now felt hollow and meaningless. I was betrayed not just by my wife but by the very fabric of the life I thought I knew. How does one reconcile the person they loved with the person who could commit such a transgression? In the days that followed, I found myself trapped in a cycle of introspection and despair. I began to retrace our steps together, desperately searching for clues that might have hinted at the impending betrayal. The familiar places we once visited together, the cozy corner of our favorite cafe, the park where we shared our first kiss, and even the quiet bench by the river, turned into painful relics of a past that could never be reclaimed. I felt as if I were walking through a museum of memories, each exhibit a stark reminder of a love that was now fractured beyond repair. At work, I struggled to maintain focus. My colleagues noticed the change in my demeanor. Once cheerful and confident, I now carried an air of melancholy and suspicion. I isolated myself during lunch breaks, retreating into my thoughts and questioning every interaction with a sense of guarded caution. I avoided eye contact, as if I feared that someone might see the anguish etched into my soul. Late at night, insomnia became my relentless companion. I would lie awake in bed, the silence around me echoing with the loud, painful questions I dared not ask aloud. How did we go from sharing dreams of a bright future to navigating a labyrinth of lies and deceit? I wrestled with the duality of my emotions, the love I once felt and the bitter resentment that now simmered beneath the surface. Every memory of Elena was tainted with betrayal, yet a part of me still clung to the hope that I could somehow salvage the fragments of our shattered past. I decided to confront her, not out of a desire for vengeance but in search of answers. When I finally summoned the courage to ask, her eyes, once a source of comfort, filled with a mixture of guilt and sorrow. She admitted that she had been unfaithful, that she had sought solace in the arms of another man during moments when she felt our relationship had lost its spark. The revelation cut deeper than I could have imagined. It was as though a knife had been plunged into the very heart of our bond, severing the connection we once nurtured for so long. In that painful conversation, as tears blurred my vision, I realized that our relationship had become a battleground for conflicting emotions. The trust we had so carefully built over the years now lay in ruins, and the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. I was left with a profound sense of betrayal and a burning question: how do you rebuild your life after the person you love has chosen to defy every promise made? My mind raced with conflicting emotions. There was anger, a searing, uncontrollable anger that threatened to erupt at the slightest provocation. There was sorrow, deep and unyielding, for the love that had once seemed so invincible. And then there was a chilling clarity, the realization that some wounds are too deep to heal, that certain breaches of trust create scars that never fully fade. As I sit here now, writing this account with a trembling hand and a heart still raw from the recent revelations, I find myself at a crossroads. The woman I once believed was my soulmate has become a stranger, and I am forced to reckon with the stark reality of our broken promises. I am left to question whether forgiveness is even possible when the foundations of love have been shattered so irreparably. This is not a story of simple heartbreak, it is a journey into the depths of betrayal, a testament to the fragility of trust, and a reflection on how our lives can be irreversibly altered by the choices of those we hold dear. My soul is now a canvas painted with the dark hues of despair and the stark lines of betrayal. I am determined, however, to emerge from this darkness, even if the road to recovery is long and fraught with pain. I write these words not just as a confession of my sorrow, but as an attempt to make sense of a reality that seems too surreal to accept. I know that there will come a time when I must decide whether to salvage what remains of our past or to let it crumble completely, severing ties with the woman who once meant everything to me. For now, I remain caught in this agonizing limbo, a prisoner of my own shattered trust, forced to confront the painful truth that love, no matter how pure, can sometimes be as fleeting and treacherous as the wind. And so, I begin this journey of self-discovery and reluctant acceptance, knowing that the next chapter of my life will force me to confront not only the ghosts of betrayal but also the hope of a future where trust might one day be rebuilt, even if it is in the ashes of what once was. In the days that followed our painful confrontation, the weight of Elena's betrayal pressed on me relentlessly. I found myself wandering through life as if in a daze, grappling with emotions too vast and complex to contain. I was no longer the man who once reveled in the simple joys of shared laughter and whispered dreams. Instead, I felt as though every moment was punctuated by a sharp, unyielding ache, a constant reminder of the trust that had been irrevocably broken. The initial shock had gradually given way to a turbulent mix of anger, sorrow, and confusion. My mornings began with an overwhelming sense of disorientation, and I struggled to summon the energy to face the day. The familiar comfort of our home, once a sanctuary, had transformed into a cold and desolate battleground where memories of happier times clashed violently with the present. I would sit at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a cup of coffee that had long since turned lukewarm, each sip a bitter reminder of a love lost. At work, I tried to maintain the facade of normalcy, but every task felt like a struggle against the undercurrent of despair that threatened to pull me under. My colleagues noticed the change. Once known for my humor and vitality, I had grown withdrawn, haunted by the ghosts of betrayal. I found it increasingly difficult to trust not only Elena but also those around me, as if the betrayal had seeped into every relationship I cherished. The isolation I felt was profound, and it was during these solitary moments that I began to question not only my past decisions but also the very nature of love itself. In the quiet solitude of my apartment, I spent countless nights wrestling with my inner demons. I questioned the reasons behind Elena's infidelity, searching desperately for answers that might justify or at least explain her actions. Had I failed her in some way? Was there a void I had neglected to fill, a silent failure on my part that had driven her to seek solace elsewhere? The self-doubt was corrosive, gnawing at the edges of my self-esteem and leaving me to wonder if I was inherently unworthy of love and loyalty. I scoured through old photographs and mementos, each one a frozen moment of happiness that now seemed tainted by betrayal. It was as if the very essence of our shared history had been rewritten, altered by the harsh brush of infidelity. One particularly cold evening, I decided to take a long walk through the city streets, a feeble attempt to escape the relentless barrage of thoughts that haunted me. The night was crisp, and the neon lights cast a surreal glow over the empty sidewalks, as if the city itself were mourning a collective loss. As I walked aimlessly, memories of Elena and I played like a relentless slideshow in my mind. I recalled the early days of our courtship, when every smile and every touch promised a future brimming with hope. How could those promises be so easily broken? In my solitude, I encountered others who, like me, were struggling to navigate the aftermath of shattered trust. A chance conversation with a kindly stranger at a park bench reminded me that I was not alone in my suffering. Their words of empathy and shared experiences stirred something within me, a small spark of resilience that had long been buried under layers of hurt. It was in that moment of vulnerability that I realized I needed to confront not only the external betrayal but also the inner turmoil that threatened to engulf me. I began to seek solace in unexpected places. Late-night visits to a quiet, nearly forgotten church provided a fragile sense of peace, a space where I could pour out my anguish without judgment. The stained-glass windows, bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, became a metaphor for my own fractured soul, beautiful yet stained by the shadows of betrayal. I spent hours sitting in the pews, grappling with questions of forgiveness and redemption. Could I ever forgive Elena for the deep wound she had inflicted upon me? More importantly, could I ever forgive myself for allowing our once-cherished love to deteriorate into something so bitter? As the weeks turned into months, I slowly began to understand that the journey toward healing was neither linear nor predictable. There were moments of clarity, a sunrise that painted the sky in hues of hope, a kind word from a friend, or even the simple act of writing down my thoughts, that offered brief reprieves from the overwhelming sorrow. Yet, there were also times when the memories crashed over me like relentless waves, each one threatening to drown me in despair. I found myself standing at the crossroads of forgiveness and resentment, teetering on the edge of a decision that would define the rest of my life. Elena, too, seemed to be struggling in her own way. Our once shared space had become a silent battleground where each of us retreated into our own respective prisons of pain and regret. There were fleeting moments when I caught a glimpse of her sorrow, a furrowed brow, a tear glistening in her eyes, moments that spoke to a shared loss of what might have been. But those moments were invariably swallowed by the vast chasm of silence that had come to define our interactions. Communication, once the lifeblood of our relationship, had withered, replaced by guarded words and unspoken accusations. Each conversation was a tightrope walk over an abyss of misunderstandings and hurt, and I found myself increasingly reluctant to cross that chasm for fear of further pain. I began to attend therapy sessions, desperate to find a way to untangle the knots of betrayal that had become so intricately woven into the fabric of my being. In those sessions, I learned that healing was not a destination but a process, a gradual, often painful journey toward reclaiming my sense of self. I was encouraged to explore the depths of my emotions, to confront the raw pain of abandonment, and to slowly rebuild the shattered pieces of my identity. The process was arduous, and there were days when I felt as if I was making no progress at all. Yet, each small step, a shared smile with a stranger, a moment of quiet reflection, even a fleeting sense of hope, helped to remind me that I was still capable of healing, of moving forward despite the overwhelming sorrow. Through it all, one truth became increasingly clear: love, in its purest form, was fragile, and trust, once broken, might never fully be restored. The realization was both liberating and devastating. I began to accept that perhaps the person I once loved had reached a point of no return, and that the relationship we had built on years of shared memories was irretrievably lost. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but the truth was undeniable: the foundation of our union had been eroded beyond repair. Now, as I sit at my desk, penning down the raw details of my journey, I cannot help but wonder what the future holds. I am haunted by the specter of Elena's infidelity, yet I also feel an emerging strength, a determination to forge a new path, one where the lessons of the past guide me toward a future unburdened by deceit. The road ahead is uncertain, fraught with challenges and painful memories, but it is a road I must travel if I am to rediscover who I am in the aftermath of betrayal. This chapter of my life is one of reckoning, a journey into the depths of my own soul, where the echoes of love and loss intertwine in a dance of bittersweet remembrance. I know that the wounds of the past may never fully heal, and that the scars of betrayal will serve as a constant reminder of the fragility of trust. Yet, in embracing these scars, I also embrace the possibility of renewal. For every broken promise, there is a chance to redefine what it means to love, to trust, and ultimately, to live. In the quiet moments before dawn, as the first light of day gently chases away the shadows of night, I find solace in the realization that even in the midst of profound betrayal, there exists a glimmer of hope, a promise that, one day, the pain will subside and the fractured pieces of my heart may find a way to come together once more. Until that day comes, I will continue this journey of self-reckoning, driven by the need to understand, to forgive, and, above all, to rediscover the man I once was before the betrayal shattered everything I held dear. The day dawned gray and heavy, as though the world itself was mourning the end of what we once held dear. I awoke to the sound of quiet footsteps echoing down the hall, a reminder that every corner of our shared home now resonated with the ghosts of memories that could never be reclaimed. My heart pounded in a rhythm of finality, and I knew that this day would mark the irrevocable end of our tangled existence. Elena and I had long ceased to speak in the soft tones of love that had once defined our conversations. Instead, our exchanges had become terse, loaded with unsaid words and an ever-widening chasm of bitterness. In the silent hours before sunrise, as I sat by the window watching the muted light wrestle with the lingering shadows, I made a decision. I could no longer bear the weight of unhealed wounds, the perpetual uncertainty that had come to define my every waking moment. It was time to sever the ties that bound us, to end the cruel dance of hopeful reconciliation that had never truly been possible. At breakfast, the air between us was thick with tension. Elena, who usually stirred her coffee with a hint of absent sadness, barely lifted her gaze from the chipped mug in front of her. The room was filled with an oppressive stillness, punctuated only by the soft clink of utensils against porcelain. I cleared my throat, breaking the silence with words that I had rehearsed in my mind for weeks. "Elena," I began, my voice steady despite the tumult inside me, "we need to acknowledge that our lives have taken divergent paths. We are no longer the people we once were, and clinging to this facade of normalcy is only prolonging our suffering." Her eyes, dark and distant, flickered with a mixture of pain and defiance. "Michael, I'm tired," she whispered, the single word carrying years of regret, exhaustion, and resignation all at once. It was a confession more powerful than any detailed explanation, a surrender to the relentless truth that we were both trapped in a cycle of bitterness. In that moment, as I looked across the table at the woman who had once been my entire world, I realized that every attempt at salvaging what remained had only deepened our wounds. The love that had once promised endless possibility had mutated into a toxic force, one that bred hostility, mistrust, and endless recriminations. Our shared past, filled with both beautiful moments and heart-wrenching betrayals, had led us to this inevitable juncture, a final, irrevocable separation. The conversation that followed was not one of sorrowful goodbyes or tearful pleas for a second chance, but rather a cold, honest reckoning. We traded bitter words like weapons, each remark a confirmation that our bond had been irreparably fractured. Elena's voice, once soft and nurturing, now carried the sharp edge of a blade as she declared, "I can't keep living in a prison of your expectations and my failures. I refuse to be chained to a memory that no longer serves us." I, too, found my voice hardened by months of pent-up anger and sorrow. "And I can't stand by watching the person I once loved become a stranger, someone who hides behind lies and half-truths. I deserve to find peace, even if it means walking away from the chaos we've become." Every word was laced with a finality that left no room for negotiation or remorse. We stood facing each other in the living room, a space that had once been filled with warmth and shared dreams, now transformed into a battlefield of our mutual disillusionment. The silence between us was deafening, each of us absorbing the magnitude of the moment. In that heavy quiet, it became painfully clear that the days of compromise and silent endurance were over. The home we had built together was now nothing more than a monument to a love that had withered under the relentless pressure of betrayal and resentment. The decision was made with a cold sense of inevitability. We would part ways, severing all emotional ties, and embark on separate journeys towards healing that could only begin with a clean break from the past. The air was thick with the finality of our decision, as though the universe itself was closing a chapter on what had once been our entire world. Later that day, as we packed our belongings in silence, every movement felt like a small act of liberation. The once cherished items, the photographs, the mementos, even the little trinkets that had marked special moments, now served as painful reminders of everything lost. Each piece I boxed away was a piece of the life we had once shared, a life now consigned to the dusty corners of memory. Elena moved with the same quiet determination, her eyes distant yet resolute, as if every item packed was a step away from the pain that had haunted her for too long. At the doorstep, where the threshold seemed to symbolize the divide between what was and what would now be, we paused one last time. The air was cool and still, heavy with the unspoken acknowledgement that we were standing at the precipice of a new beginning, one that demanded the erasure of a past marred by betrayal. With a final, lingering look, Elena stepped outside, and I watched her silhouette fade into the distance. The image of her retreating figure was seared into my mind, a bittersweet testament to the irrevocable nature of our parting. In that final moment, as I closed the door behind me, I felt an overwhelming surge of both grief and relief. The agony of our shared past, with its tangled memories and unresolved conflicts, would forever be a part of me, but so too would the promise of a future unburdened by that relentless despair. I knew that healing would not be instantaneous, that the scars of betrayal would take time to fade. Yet, there was a glimmer of hope in the notion that from the ashes of a love destroyed, one might eventually rise, reborn, resilient, and ready to embrace a life defined not by the failures of the past, but by the lessons learned from it. And so, our journey reached its final, hostile severance, a conclusion marked not by a gentle farewell, but by a resolute parting of ways. Elena and I were now two souls adrift in separate currents, each determined to navigate the turbulent waters of our own healing. The bitter end of our union was a stark reminder that sometimes, the only path to true liberation is found in the courage to let go, to break free from the bonds that once promised eternal love but instead delivered relentless pain. As I stepped out into the open world, I carried with me the weight of our shattered past, but also a newfound determination to forge a future on my own terms. The echoes of our love, both its beauty and its betrayal, would forever be etched in my memory, serving as both a warning and a guide for the days ahead. The hostile separation was final, and with it, a chapter closed, a chapter that, despite its agony, paved the way for the possibility of rebirth and the hope that one day, peace would replace the tumult of lost love.